Hello everyone. Little question. Has it ever happened to you that you become aware just recently of something that has been going on for a long time? It could be a topic, an issue, a celebrity, a writer, a debate that has been going on for a while, and you were not aware of it, and suddenly you are aware of it. And it has been going on for a long time. This is what has been happening to me of late. About a year ago, I became aware of Christopher Hitchens. Rest in peace, he passed away, I believe, in 2012. Died of cancer. I had never been aware of Christopher Hitchens. I hadn't been aware either of George Galloway, whom I follow now every week. He has a video, a channel, excuse me, on YouTube, the mother of all talk shows and so on. I had never been aware of these two gentlemen. And it's only in the last year or so that I have become so. Why was not aware of them? Well, Christopher Hitchens, I think now I know that we both went to America at about the same time, really in 1980 or 1981. And he was very famous and continues to be. I was not aware of him at the time. He was a debater, he was a writer, an intellectual, and he wrote for many journals and magazines, and an intellectual from Oxford. And, well, at the time I was just got married, had babies, and I wasn't reading those journals. I'm sure I saw him perhaps once on C-SPAN. I think I did, but in one of talking about one of his books. I was not aware of him really. Actually, I wonder how he managed to get into the United States. Probably at the beginning with a press pass or some intellectual. Some being an intellectual, that he knew his way about on how to be able to go in and stay there. I say this because I remember when I applied to go to the United States, I had met in Oxford at the university. I met my future husband there. And he wanted me to go back with him to the United States and marry there and so on. So for a whole year, he did all the paperwork. So because everything had been done through the American embassy and here in England, and because everything had been done properly, I had no problem at the end getting the green card, the so-called. I got it within 1 month, I think, because we had done everything. It took about a year. And I have to tell you a story about this, because after we did all the paperwork, I had to go to the American embassy. One of the things that you had to answer at the time, I don't know whether you still have to do it now, was 2 questions. Are you a communist or are you a fascist? Something like that. Well, I was never a fascist. But I had been not a member, but sympathetic to the Spanish Communist Party about 10 years earlier, in the early 70s. I was never a card carrier. I had never officially become a member of the party, but I used to go to their meetings. It was in my early 20s, and I remember how I enjoyed it, going to all these meetings and become political. And I remember spending nights outside the protesting, outside the South African embassy against apartheid and so on, and we would sleep there outside, and it was great fun. We, you're young, you want to change the world. It was a few months where I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and I thought I was changing the world and so on. So when it came to answer that question, I said no. And I really didn't think I was lying, because it had been, for a few months, it had been 10 years earlier. I was never a card carrier, as I said, so I felt perhaps it wasn't 100% the truth, but I thought if I start explaining, well, 10 years ago I went to these meetings and this, you have to start explaining, and I thought that's going to be worse, so I said no. So eventually I was called to the American embassy for the last signing off of something or other. And it was an interview. And I was called, I was waiting there, and then I was called. And I remember that the lady asking me questions, I was standing there, she was behind the counter. And the lady asked me why I wanted to go. I said I was going to get married there, and so. And then she said, wait here. Okay, and she went off, and I stayed there waiting. And then she came back, and she said, and I remember her eyes, they were cold, there was no life there. She was looking at me, through me, as it were, but there was, she didn't see me, or she was, it just went through. Anyway, she said, she paused, and then she said, we have reason to believe that you are a member of a communist party. And at that moment, I don't know why, this is all in a couple of seconds, okay? I thought, there is a camera watching me, watching my reaction. I don't know why, I couldn't see, I wasn't looking at anything. This is the first thought that came to my mind. I was being watched. And so in that couple of seconds, I decided the worst thing would be to say, who, me? Oh no, never, no. I went in total sort of frozen, to a frozen state, and I said, what? No. And I didn't say anything else, and I continued to look at her. My reaction wanted to be, if someone says to you, I believe that you are Chinese, and you react, what is your reaction? You say, what? You don't start explaining, no, I am not Chinese. Your first reaction is, what are you talking about? And that was my reaction. And she said, wait here. And then she disappeared. And then she came back again, and she said, all right. And she signed off, and so on. And when I left, I thought, was I talking to someone from the CIA or something like that? Oh my God. Did I actually talk to someone from the... Anyway, I went to America, and they gave me a visa as a fiancé's visa for 3 months, with the proviso that I would have to be married within 3 months, otherwise the visa would be invalid and so on. So we did everything right, and I got married, and I got my green card, and everything was fine. So, but my point is that you had to answer those questions, and Christopher Hitchens was an avowed, and he said that himself so many times, socialist or communist or Trotskyist and so on. So I don't know how he managed to actually go there and then become American and so on, but that's beside the point. So about a year ago, I became aware of him as a writer, as a great debater. And the first debate I saw on YouTube was when he wrote that book, God is Not Great. And he's debating everyone and their brother about how terrible religion is and how all those arguments that he made. And as I was watching him for the very first time, influenced by anybody, I had never heard any commentaries pro or against Christopher Hitchens at all. I was watching him raw for the first time, talking about deriding Christianity. And I was laughing. My initial reaction was, I can't take this person seriously. I didn't realize at the time that he was so acclaimed. But to me, he seemed like a little bit of a charlatan. An upper class, well-read, very learned person, but as a person who did not understand Christianity at all, or perhaps he did, but what he seemed to have was those 6 or 7 points, in his back pocket that he used to continuously look at what, the Crusades, and look at this, and you are a flock, and all those arguments that he made. Avoiding going deeply into the philosophy and the theology of it all. He reminded me, as this happens in the United States, not so much in Europe at all, but in the United States there are Protestant denominations that actually go to Catholics and who don't know the Bible chapter and verse and so on, and they go with their also 6 or 7 points or quotes from the Bible. And, show me where the Virgin Mary is, and show me where the Pope, show me where, and they quote the Bible to you, Jeremiah 1, 2, 74, 129. I actually know a priest who, when one young person approached him with this, quoting chapter and verse, Jeremiah 1, 2, 74, 129, this priest said, yes, and what does Jeremiah 1, 2, 74, 130 says? Anyway, but they do have these points, and they come and use the Bible, I would say, sometimes as a weapon. Anyway. This is how I thought he was approaching. In other words, he was very well read, but sallow in his arguments. But of course, he had the gift of language that is very obvious, and you have all these beautiful, the vocabulary, the adjectives, the adverbs, the turns of phrases, the figures of speech, and he does that wonderfully. Also, he had the gift of being able to articulate it very, very quickly. In other words, if we are arguing, okay, you and I, about something, I don't think I can go into any depth about any one particular topic or study. But something that I do know is Catholicism, because, as you know, those who follow me, you know, orphanage nuns and so on. So from a very early age, I got the faith, as I try to say, the seeds of the faith that would evolve, and you know, I would understand them throughout my life more and more. But I was given just the seeds. So even though I'm not a theologian or anything, when I do understand, if you tell me something, I can tell you, yes, that's Catholic doctrine, or if you are a little bit off, I can sense it. Yes, but so, in other words, my knowledge, if I can call it that, is purely intuitive. But I can reply to you if you give me something about the Catholic faith. I can hold a conversation. I can think of the answers pretty much right away. My problem, unlike the great Christopher Hitchens, is that I need a little bit of time to organize my thoughts to answer you. You know, I cannot. But he could just, you know, thought of it and could articulate it immediately and very elegantly, and so on. Most of us need a couple of seconds there to think, to express it properly. But he could do that very, very well. But I was laughing watching his answers and his debates, because I thought he's not actually delving into, you know, what Christianity is about. He's just touching the surface out there. Anyway, then I learned that he was debating just about everybody on this question of religion, not only Christianity, but all religions. That's a terrible thing. And he was winning all the debates. That was clear. I only saw him once, actually twice. One time with Dinesh D'Souza, an American thinker, and he writes books and makes movies, who made the point to him that it was not that he was non-Christian, it was that he was anti-Christian. He says, why do you spend so much, I'm paraphrasing what Mr. D'Souza said, but he said something like, why do you put so much effort into fighting and trying to put down Christianity? Why do you put so much effort on because you are not a non-Christian but an anti-Christian? Because, for example, the point that he was making was, look, if, for example, me, myself, I'm not talking about the D'Souza, and I am not, let's say, a Hindu. Okay, so I don't spend my life trying to put Hinduism down. I'm just not a Hindu, and that's it. But all his efforts were to put Christianity down. The contempt oozing out of him, it's very, very obvious. So Mr. D'Souza was asking, and that is one time when I saw him a little bit uncomfortable, sort of like saying, yeah, you made a good point there. The other time that I saw him very uncomfortable was when he was not debating Americans with his wonderful upper-class English accent, which is always an advantage. Don't ask me why, but there you are. But he was debating Professor John Lennox of Oxford University, professor of mathematics. And so he wasn't winning that debate because several debates they had. I think they were friends. Professor Lennox said that he was a nice man, that you could talk to him and everything, but he had this show of going around debating the terrible things the religion does to people. Anyway, that was his thing. But Professor Lennox actually was drawing him all the time to talk about it in theological and philosophical, at the philosophical level, that approach. And he didn't do very well there. In other words, when you delve in with, deeply into the subject, there were many things that he was not aware of or didn't want to bring up anyway. That was one time when I found him uncomfortable. He wasn't winning the argument, and he was beginning to appear a little bit superficial, and he was very uncomfortable with that, I think. So that was 2 times. The third time, not talking about religion, talking about politics, and this was about almost 20 years ago now, discussing the Iraq War, the second one in 2003, whenever that was. And he was having a debate with George Galloway. Politics. Okay, let me... all right. So these are 2, not Englishmen, George Galloway, Scottish man, working class, politician, member of parliament for many, many years. He has a channel now that I follow, the mother, as I said, the mother of all talk shows, something like that. Working class, socialist too, but someone who hasn't abandoned this old-fashioned socialism. By old-fashioned, I mean when a socialist, you were a socialist because you saw it in terms of the working class versus the ruling class. That would change, and so the left now is more about identity politics than it is about class. What is the difference? The difference being that when you talk about class in the old-fashioned way of the working class or lower middle class, but the working class, there you have black, white, men, women, this, that, a million things. What they have in common is that they are the working class. So if you think about it in terms of a cake, for example, you cut a slice of that cake, and in that slice, in that piece, you have women, men, black, white, as I said. Okay, but identity politics is more, if you can think about it this way, as a pizza. Okay, so this slice is men, this slice is women, this slice is black, this slice is white, and so on. So when you take a piece, you just take a piece of that one particular identity. So what happens is that each identity is pulling and you're breaking in the middle. Whereas with the cake, when you took a piece of every identity. What they had in common was the social class to which they belonged. So Mr. Galloway belongs to that old-fashioned, the old left. All right, so they were having a debate about the Iraq War. By that time, of course, Mr. Galloway, now I see that he was a leader in the campaign against the war. And Christopher Hitchens was a writer and a debater very much pro the Iraq War, and he's giving in the debate and in many writings the reasons for that. So he had moved from being a socialist, a Trotskyist, which he had been throughout his life, to almost what we now call a neocon, pro-war. So there had been a movement there. There had been a projection. He had sort of abandoned the left, as he himself said, and moved on and developed his own ideas. So here they are debating the Iraq war. My goodness. You all know George Galloway. Again, I didn't know of him until about a year ago. Why not? Well, when he was in Parliament, I was in America. Then when I came back, I think when he started with the Iraq war, I think I was in France at that time, teaching there in an English college. Anyway, I didn't know of him. So all of a sudden, up in the YouTube feed comes George Galloway, and something that you have all seen, his before the Senate, I think it's in 2005, which is an amazing display of not only erudition, but George Galloway is an orator. He's a politician, and he can make his point across as an orator. Christopher Hitchens was not an orator. He was a good debater, and he was... Anyway, so these two guys, one from Scotland, one from England. George Galloway, working class, but very sure of himself. Doesn't apologize for his class. Doesn't look up to the upper classes. Very certain, very sure of himself. Christopher Hitchens, an upper class intellectual. And I see these two things, the working class and the upper middle class debating on an issue. It's fascinating to watch, and I will put, in case you haven't seen it, and most of you have, but just in case, for some of you who may be younger or from abroad, I urge you to watch this debate, and I will put it on the description box if I can find the link. I think I will. So there they are debating. And Christopher Hitchens is doing what he did best. The great turns of phrases, the vocabulary, the adjectives, the nouns, the irony, the upper class irony, Okay, so he is jabbing, he's doing this and doing this, like a boxer dancing around, boxing, sand in your eyes, blood, he's dancing around, jabbing. And George Galloway is there, not impressed. And then the working class goes, punch! And that's it. And the dancing stops. And you see pretty much Christopher Hitchens on the ground with his tongue hanging out. After all this fancy dancing, punch. It's fascinating to watch, and I just wanted to share this with you because I have been watching these old debates, and I just wonder what you think about it. Okay, so this is my video for today. I'm going to do another one in Spanish, so this is a short one. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.